Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Jamie Lavin, and I, along with my colleague Ryan Whalen, lead the local infrastructure hub for Bloomberg Philanthropies. On behalf of Mike Bloomberg and Jim Anderson, the head of the Government Innovation Practice, it's my pleasure to welcome you today. This session is brought to you by the U.S. Conference of Mayors and Results for America. And today, we're going to discuss how federal funding can be used to improve roadway safety and sustainability and make cities more equitable and accessible. We're excited to be joined today by two federal officials who will discuss how the Biden administration is deploying historic infrastructure dollars to drive transformative results in communities around this nation. They will also discuss upcoming grant deadlines and strategies for developing strong funding applications, particularly for the RAISE program. First, I'm pleased to welcome Shailen Bhatt, Administrator of the Federal Highways Administration, who before this role worked in multiple states to improve roadway safety, address transportation's impacts on our climate, and ensure that transportation systems deliver equitable results. Maybe most importantly for today's audience, Administrator Bhatt started his career working in Toronto and for the Bowling Green, Kentucky MPO. So he understands the challenges local governments face in working with their regional, state, and national partners. Administrator Bhatt, thank you so much for being with us today, and the Zoom is yours.
Well, thank you so much. And it's an honor to be asked. And I just really want to appreciate Bloomberg and everyone for jumping on here. And just when I think about the bipartisan infrastructure law, it's like this big shiny mass of $1.2 trillion just somewhere over the horizon. Everywhere I go across the country, I hear from people saying things like, if only we could get access to it, or how do we actually turn this into a successful project? And that's what I just wanted to
the light off. Yeah, that does
start out by just highlighting is that it's one thing to win a federal grant or to have somebody decide that they're going to put a project in your town. It's an entirely different animal to actually turn that award announcement into a successful project and get to a ribbon cutting. And so, throughout my career, whether it was beginning my career with the city of Toronto, trying to reduce single occupant vehicle trips, or running an MPO in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and for the 10 surrounding counties, I've always been very aware of the challenges that local entities face in delivering these projects. I've also run two state DOTs. I was the Secretary of Transportation in Colorado and in Delaware. And in both of those places, I thought we cultivated really excellent relationships. I think about DRCOG, the Denver Regional Council of Governments, and CDOT. We actually would just pass through a lot of our CMAQ money to them. And we worked really hand in glove to deliver projects like the $1.2 billion, what's called the Central 70 project now. It's the CAP over 70 that tore down a 50-year-old viaduct. We worked with Denver to deliver that project. It's now the model for a lot of these reconnecting projects that are out there now. I remember working in Delaware with cities like Wilmington, but even cities like Lewis, or even smaller towns, and saying, how can we be a successful partner? So what I would just say, I'm going to let my colleague from OST maybe talk about the RAISE grant specifically, but there's a ton of money that's coming out from formula funding. We have a ton of discretionary programs, both that OST is leading, that federal highways, where the bulk of the funding exists, whether it's Protect, CFI. We are just incredibly fortunate at this time in transportation to have all these funds. But I would say cultivating a great relationship with your state DOT partner is probably a really good way to get there. And I hear from states all the time saying, Administrator Bhatt, it's great that you had that relationship, but that's not, what we hear now, or our state may not be as receptive. But for all of us here, when this $1.2 trillion bill is done, and we're about halfway through it, we're going to have to go back to the American people and to Congress and say, let's reauthorize the funding bill. And quite frankly, if the story is, well, we got a bunch of money, but because this state or this city or this municipality couldn't quite get it done, the American people don't care about what level of government didn't execute. They're just and you didn't turn it into a successful project. The Federal Highway Administration is there with you. So with that, I will pause, and I'm available to stick around for questions if you'd like, but turn it back to Jamie.
Thank you so much, Administrator Bhatt. I think you couldn't be speaking truer words. We're all really focused on how we're going to tell the story of what these dollars did and how they actually improve people's lives. So with that, I'm going to turn to your colleague at the U.S. Department of Transportation, Andrea Jacobson, who leads the program manager for the RAISE program. We're excited to have you here to share the practical information that cities need to develop ambitious projects for RAISE funding. And when Andrea is done, we're excited to welcome questions for both Administrator Bhatt and for Andrea. So I want all the city leaders who are on the Zoom right now to be thinking and formulating some questions, because this is your chance to ask the people who, have their fingers on the pulse of this funding. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Andrea.
Well, thank you so much, Jamie, and really appreciate the invite to speak about the RAISE program. It is, in fact, a very unique opportunity, as many of you know, and it's unique in that it enables local governments to receive surface transportation infrastructure funds. If you want to go to the next slide, please. Yeah, thanks. It enables localities to receive funds directly from the Department of Transportation. And in fact, the majority of our RAISE grantees are units of local government, so cities, towns, and counties. These grants are merit-based. They are awarded on a competitive basis to projects that align with our statutorily required merit criteria. And we're required to have them represent both a geographic as well as modal diversity. So that means that the department is awarding a variety of project types, including roads, rails, trails, transit, and port projects directly to towns and cities across the country each year. Next slide, please. So we know from the most recent round of RAISE that projects compete well when they have written a compelling story. That's how I like to describe it to our applicants. It's a story that clearly defines the transportation problem in their community and explains how their proposed project was the solution to that problem, and who will benefit and how far-reaching those benefits may be they in the local community, they may have regional impacts, or reach as far as nationally. Those benefit claims are supported through data. We do a lot of talk about data-driven responses. We also need descriptive details. Successful applicants are able to bring the reviewer to the community for which this project is proposed. So keep in mind, evaluators may know nothing about your area or the transportation problems facing it. You are the experts on your projects and your communities. You know both of them best. So use the RAISE application as your opportunity to educate our reviewers. You want them to know why your project is absolutely essential to solving this transportation problem, why RAISE funds are necessary to do that, and how those outcomes that you claim and describe in your application will come to fruition. So again, only you can bring your project to life for our reviewers. You can explain, for example, somebody explained this to me in a debrief, which I'll talk about debriefs in a moment, but the other day somebody explained to me about how roundabouts were innovative for their community. Or perhaps you want to talk about an at-grade rail crossing that closes traffic 10 times a day and delays emergency response vehicles and first responders. Or perhaps you have gaps or adequate sidewalk coverage, putting school children at risk if they walk to school. Perhaps you've got visions for connecting affordable housing with the laying of new roads or streets in your community, or perhaps you're connecting to affordable jobs. Perhaps you have salmon and you need culverts. You need to modernize your culverts to allow for the flow upstream of your salmon. And again, you might have rivers in your community that rise above flood levels and cover roads. So bring our reviewers to you and help them understand, not just with data, but really descriptive details that help them understand, your climate. Is it desert? Are you coastal? Is it freezing temperatures and lots of snow in the winter? Tell us about all of that. And finally, what we know about projects that compete well is they demonstrate a realistic timeline for their project. They acknowledge the risks in their project. All projects have risks, so it's important to identify them and how you will mitigate them if they arise. Projects that compete well also identify all funding sources, and they document those funding sources, are committed to the project. And then lastly, they articulate how and why they have the technical capacity to deliver the project, or they might articulate who they're going to partner with to jointly deliver that project. Next slide, please. So we've learned that many applicants may not be successful in their first submission to RAISE, but we also know that they may become recipients in a subsequent round. So please keep trying. So for example, for RAISE 2023, the department received 1,100 eligible applications that requested almost $15 billion in funding. The department awarded 162 projects from that pool. So as you can see, it's very competitive, but the good news is that we do provide a debrief. As I mentioned before, we talk with you about the specifics of your application. If you are unsuccessful, you may request a debrief. We're not only going to talk to you about the strengths of your application, but we are going to talk to you about areas that you could improve, which would help you make informed updates to your application for a future submission. Other lessons that we've learned from previous rounds is follow instructions in the current NOFO. We welcome resubmissions, but please make sure you're looking at the requirements in the current NOFO and updating your application accordingly. I also want to stress that all eligible applications receive a merit evaluation. So you really want to knock it out of the park on that merit criteria first portion, and then you want to knock it out of the park there so you can continue on, or your application continue on for that next level of review. Again, as I mentioned before, you want to make sure you're including that supporting data-driven response, as well as details to evidence that your project is addressing the problem according to the merit criteria, and that the project will be ready to go. Another lesson learned is we need to see clear scope of work, and the scope of work should include eligible activities under the RAISE program. Another kind of lesson learned is making sure that you carefully identify your project location. This is critical for two reasons. It can impact the cost share, or what we call the non-federal funding requirements. So if you're an urban project, but in a local, like in a designated area of persistent poverty or historically disadvantaged community, you may be eligible to receive up to 100% federal funding for your project. But again, it is predicated on the accurate designation of your project location. Also, we have different minimum capital grant funding requirements. So, and those are based on location as well. So really important to identify your project location as accurately as possible. I would add that you should check for inconsistencies in your project budget across your application materials. And lastly, it may go without saying, but I'm going to say it, please submit the full application and do so on time. Next slide, please. So to get started, you can turn to the RAISE program website for all things RAISE, past and present. We have frequently asked questions. We post the NOFO once it's available. We post recordings of previous webinars. a list of all applications and awards, fact sheets on previous awards, as well as grant agreement templates. So you can understand the requirements that will follow if you are selected for a RAISE award. The department has a newer resource called the DOT Navigator. And that is a resource that helps applicants in preparing for their grant application. So the DOT Navigator has a lot of resources, including a grant preparation checklist, a climate change checklist, as well as an explainer on conducting benefit cost analysis. There are also additional links to technical assistance resource centers and programs for both applicants and grantees. Lastly, grants.gov is kind of your search engine for federal funding opportunities, not only for DOT, but federal government wide. And it is the only way to submit a RAISE grant application. All right, thank you. And that concludes my remarks on the RAISE program.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Thank you all for the questions in the chat. You guys got it. We also are really fortunate to have Kim Bathrick from USDOT, from Andrea's team, on today. So if we don't get to any of the questions that you've asked, Kim has graciously volunteered to answer as many as we can in the chat. And so our first question came from Kalamazoo, Michigan. Kerry Williams, if you want to just unmute yourself and if you're able to put your camera on, and you can ask your question. I know sometimes it takes a little bit to find that unmute button. So I will help Terry. She said that Kalamazoo received a RAISE planning grant. How does that impact DOT's view of construction grant for the same project once planning is complete?
We have recipients who return after they complete their planning project or it's well underway, then they are eligible to reapply for a construction capital grant. That is permissible under the RAISE program.
Fantastic. Our next question comes from Mayor Acquanetta Warren. Mayor Warren, do you want to ask your question?
Okay, sorry, had problems unmuting. I'm not trying to be greedy, but I'm part of the needy. We were awarded a great RAISE grant for $15 million. It has opened up an economic corridor now. Can I reapply for more money?
Yes. First, congratulations on your RAISE grant. But yes, being a past recipient does not preclude you from applying again. We welcome you to reapply.
Thank you.
And our next question is for Administrator Bhatt, and it's really about, how do you see the formula funds fitting together with these discretionary funds to really move forward transportation systems? We know that these, as Andrea said, these are really competitive programs, these discretionary ones. How should cities be thinking about leveraging formula funds and working with their states?
Yeah, look, the RAISE grants now were the Tiger grants when I was an Obama appointee. And so I think they're called BUILD, maybe under the last administration. So everybody has like a little different take, right? On the, under the Obama administration, we were all about livability and partnering with HUD and DOT and EPA to create livable communities. And, now we're talking about equity and, some very similar concepts, but it's just a little different take. And so I think it's important to understand on the discretionary side, what's the tune that will get you the most upvotes from the judges in America's Got Talent or whatever the voice competition that this is. I would also, and I think Andrea did a fantastic job of highlighting how you get in there. I would also just add hitting the construction milestones and the delivery milestones, also very important. So while you're telling that story, we also have to be able to see and understand, how does this project actually get delivered? Because there are deadlines on the money. It does, you do need to hit those milestones. And so that's something that a lot of our reviewers are also looking at as well. And then I think the formula funds, again, I mean, quite frankly, for a lot of and I hear this from a lot of folks on these calls, right, that the states aren't listening to us. The states don't really care about what's happening in cities. And I used to get this a lot in Colorado, where people would say, you spend way too much money in Denver and you ignore the rest of us. And I was actually, no, the people are in the Denver metro area. The economic growth is in the Denver metro area. We actually probably need to spend more of our money there, but let's not do the data-driven analysis that Andrea talked about on that. We'll just agree to disagree on this. So again, I would come back to that states are going to spend their formula money. What I am trying to highlight are states that are doing a good job partnering with locals, and let's reward them for their good behavior. So I'd say if you've got a good example of like a state partner who's working well with you, let us know. And if you've got a state that could use some encouragement, feel free to reach out to me as well. I'm happy to come broker a little bit of a détente.
That's really good advice. I hear often about those states in the latter the latter grouping, and I think it's really important to know that you have partners in the federal government who can be helpful, whether it's thinking about broadband funding and working with your states, or thinking about money for transportation systems. So Mayor Lake of York, I know that you have a question. Would you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Yes, hello, how are you today? This is Mayor Lake with City of York. We applied for the RAISE grant last year. We were not awarded. During the debriefing, it mentioned that we did not have the data-driven information that you referred to. For a rural community in West Alabama, it's kind of hard to get that data. Is there any way we can get some technical assistance to help us determine what data we need and how do we go about getting it? Thank you.
Yes, exceptional question. We have recently put more tools out for applicants. The ETC Explorer has a lot of data on how your community may be disadvantaged or transportation disadvantaged, and it includes a wealth of data that you can use in your application, and you can find a link to that on the DOT Navigator. And that link was in the slides, and I don't know if it can be put in the chat, but the DOT Navigator has a lot of tools for the data that we're looking for to support the benefit claims, to both define the current transportation problem and then to, explain the potential benefits of the project upon completion. So we've heard, and we definitely are trying to make data available to our applicants.
I'll just also put in a plug. The local infrastructure hub has been running boot camps for communities with a population of 150,000 or less, because we know that you struggle with the ability to pull together this type of information for an application. And so I'll be sharing a little later in the chat. If you want to get support, our RAISE bootcamp has already started, but I'm sure we can get you in if you need some help, especially with your data. And we have specific sessions on that data capacity. Great. I'm going to do moderator's privilege and do one more question, because we have Andrea and Administrator Bhatt. And I just want to ask Dave Gatton had asked, does the number of RAISE applications imply cities need more direct funding? He votes yes. Do we need more local block grant funds to meet demand? How are you guys thinking about this? Maybe it's a little bit tricky for you to answer.
I'm happy to take that. I think that there's always going to be a demand for more transportation funding. And I have always said that the best decisions are made at the state and local level. Now, I will say that I think that when the MPO process is working properly, when there is trust on both sides, that's when you get better outcomes. What does not work well is when you have a bully on either side of the equation. And but I would also say, too, you also be careful what you ask for, because federal funding comes with pretty intense federal funding requirements. And just like the mayor from York, Alabama was saying, like, hey, we're a little bit under-resourced. You want to make sure you just have the ability to deliver, and that's what state DOTs have been doing for a while. And the final piece I'd just say is that's a congressional question, right? Like for the next authorization. And I would just finish where I started, which is like, it's so critical that regardless of the branch of government that we deliver on, or maybe the level of government, we deliver on this program. So that when we come to the next funding, it's about how do we get more, as opposed to, well, you didn't deliver on X, Y, or Z, and so we don't need to fund you at that same level.
Yeah, and I'm just going to put in a plug again. We're going to be having a session to celebrate the 2-year anniversary of the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act. That's going to focus on exactly this piece, right? Like, these are long tail projects that often you won't see the results of for a little while. How do cities start telling the story of these investments even before the concrete is poured, or while, you know, the street is being dug up and people are only seeing the negative consequences of it? We want to make sure that you're able to help your communities envision what the transformation is going to mean and how it's going to help people. I know we're about to get to that in our policy panel. So I just want to really thank Administrator Bhatt. Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, Kim, who's been answering questions in the chat, and Carly will try to get to yours in the chat. I'm sorry we ran out of time. Thank you for your time and for your service, and we really appreciate it. And now I'm going to introduce our fantastic policy panel made up of mayors and city leaders who have been, anxious. We're working really hard to apply for these funds, and now they've gotten them, and what are they going to do with them? So first, I want to introduce Mayor Acquanetta Warren of Fontana, California, Mayor Fred Teague of Russellville, Arkansas, who is joined by Russellville City Planner Sarah Dundall, and Mayor Barbara Buffaloe of Columbia, Missouri, who is joined by Columbia's Director of Public Works, Shane Creech. So we have a great panel, star-studded, and so I'm going to start with you, Mayor Warren. It's so great to see you again. The last time I saw you was at the U.S. Conference of Mayors meeting in Columbus, Ohio, and you were talking about the RAISE application, how you had successfully won a RAISE grant, and what it took to do that, including telling those really compelling stories of children who couldn't get to school because of the access that they were missing. You've gotten the money. You got a $15 million grant to increase lane capacity and develop an integrated traffic system and help students walk and bike to and from school. Can you tell us a little bit about how the project is promoting transportation equity and how it's progressed since you were awarded funding last year?
Well, I got to tell you, this whole journey has been just wonderful for our community. Everyone is still very excited. We even had the U.S. Secretary Pete Buttigieg join us to see what we were doing, and that just turned the whole community upside down in happiness. We are now basically working with Caltrans, which is our DOT in California, and we're expecting the bids to go out for construction no later than September of next year. There was a lot of pre-work that needed to be done with all of our partners here, with our utilities. Everyone came together. The meeting was so packed, I gave up my chair because I needed them to sit down and get to work. And so we anticipate finalizing all our plans by the end of April. And once those final engineering plans are done, we've sent out our bids. We know that we will be completed within 15 months. But on an update, we now have been working with various landowners that are in the same area for economic development. And we are working on, right now, looking at making some of that area a hospital corridor for medical needs. We saw during COVID, people being treated out in parking lots, and particularly in the Inland Empire, which encompasses Riverside County and San Bernardino. We're in San Bernardino County. We don't have enough resources. So the idea of creating that corridor for our students and being able to look down the street at a hospital corridor that is also potentially could be training for new doctors and nurses and other technicians, we're excited about. So those are the discussions we're having, and the entire community is anticipating the great transportation roundabouts, the street lights. We were able to put a street light on a corner recently as a result of this grant that was so needed for so many years. I look at my kids. They started off at this high school that had all these problems, and they cannot believe when they come back home how much has been done, and new sidewalks. But I got to tell you, The story that you tell to DOT has to be one not just from your lips, but from the people that will be most impacted. And that's what we did. And as a result, even those graduating seniors that participated, we're going to always try to keep up with them, let them know what you did that day in that video, it came about. I just want to thank the United States Transportation. I want to thank you as Conference of Mayors. And anytime I have an opportunity to tell you how great the RAISE grant is, I will take it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Mayor Warren. I think it's so important what you talked about, like really developing this portfolio approach to thinking about the project. It's not just about this one corridor, but what else could you do and activate as a result of that? And it reminds me a little bit of what Carly was asking in the chat, because you want to be thinking about how this is going to impact the community outside of just this one, corridor that's going to be rejuvenized. And so next I want to come to Mayor Teague of Russellville. Russellville has a population of approximately 30,000 residents. So we're really excited to have you here today to encourage some of our smaller cities to apply for this program. I often hear from smaller communities, it's a lot to apply for a federal grant. It's going to go to the bigger city, nearby. Why take the time? So I think it's really important to hear from some of those success stories. And so I'd love for you to talk about your $24 million grant to build 13 miles of multi-use trails and about how that project and what it's going to do for Russellville's residents.
I don't know how you follow Miss Warren there. I mean, I love her story. I love her enthusiasm. It's pretty amazing. I'm super proud. I'm a first-term mayor. I was not a politician, so I was a businessman. But prior to me taking office, Sarah Dundall, our city planner, came to me and the previous mayor and said, "Hey, we would really like to we would like to be able to apply for the RAISE grant." And I was in full support of her doing that. And I'll be honest with you, her effort was basically, because this was our first time to apply, and she's like, "Man, we just want to apply so we can get some feedback, because we had a neighboring city that it took them 5 years, and so, or 5 different times." And so as they were as Sarah assembled a team of people to really work and get along with our engineers, because Sarah and I have a belief that quality of life, quality of place is the most important thing for a community. And I want everyone to hear quality of life, quality of place is workforce attraction. That literally attracts workforces. We actually have a $68 million plant investment from Owens Corning that's about to break ground, meeting with them later this afternoon. And one of the things that they said at our chamber meeting was the reason they chose Russellville was quality of life. So don't look at these things as just infrastructure and trails and different things. These are workforce attraction. This makes quality of life, quality of place for all of our citizens. And so it's so important that you look to these things. And so going back to Sarah, she and our city engineer and this amazing team just really put together this program. And we were able to partner with what was called the Arkansas Municipal League here in Arkansas and get access to some previous grants. So don't try to reinvent the wheel. Look at the wheel that's already been successful and model after that and use that as a template. We were able to do that, and they put together an amazing proposal and a grant. And at the end, I was like, I felt really, really confident that they were going to get this on the first time. I don't know if anyone else agreed with me, but man, it was amazing. And all of a sudden, I remember where I was at when I was with a state senator and a representative from one of our Washington congressman's office, and they told me we got the grant. And then I got the call that night from Congressman Bozeman. It was really amazing, and so just super exciting, great stuff. And like I say, our team just really, Sarah had the vision to say, "Hey, listen, let's go forward. Let's try to figure this out." She put the right team together. They put the narrative together. It is, like Miss Warren said, it is a narrative. It's a narrative of the people. It's their story. It's their trails. We already have over 12 miles of trail systems in Russellville. So this is going to be a complement that's going to connect us from the north, south, east, and west. And just a great walkability, connectivity is so important. We prioritize, we've got a $5 million project, drainage project we're about to wrap up right now by the end of the year. So we have sidewalks are such a priority to us because those are those are the roads for certain people. Some people don't have the luxury of driving a car, you know, or even riding a bike. So they need to be able to walk, and they need to be able to ride their scooters or their wheelchairs. But like I say, to me, it's economic development. It's quality of place, quality of life for all of our citizens. And you know, I just want to let you move on over to Sarah, because like I say, she's the one that put the nuts and bolts in it, and they're the ones. One thing I want to say is, just because you get the grant, getting the grant, I think Sarah and her team have figured out, is the easy part. It's getting it off the ground and getting the shovel in the dirt, and getting everything shovel ready is the hard part. But we have a great team that just works really, really hard, and I can't wait to see you know, when they first get to break ground on this, because it's going to be amazing, and I'm super proud of all of our team and all of the team that came together. So.
Thank you so much, Mayor Teague. I am going to get to Sarah now, and would love to just hear how you worked with Russellville's residents and did the really needed community engagement to get them involved in the planning process, and then what advice you have for other cities. And I think, you know, when Mayor Teague talks about now the hard work begins, how do you sustain their involvement, right? So they're involved in the application process, but they're also involved once you start planning that out, and maybe it's even a little bit easier on a project like this that maybe has some, you know, community service involvement. I think we have him on mute.
Thank you for that reminder. I forgot that I needed to unmute. So I'll back up. So we did, you asked advice, so I'll start off with a little of that. We absolutely, I heard of Conway, city just down the road, getting a grant for the trail system last year. And so we actually met with them and asked them a lot of questions. So that's one thing I would advise any other person trying to get this grant, is look for a grant that has been awarded for a similar project that you want to do, because they've already built that foundation. They've already laid the groundwork for you, and you can take what they've done and just build on that. So one of the things we learned with that was was the amount of community support Conway had. And I knew that that would absolutely be instrumental in us getting this grant. And so I actually met with the director of the Chamber of Commerce, and we brainstormed who in the community we needed to include in what we called our community advisory committee. And we're actually using them as we move forward with other projects. So we are keeping them involved additionally, but we reached out. It was a team effort between the director and myself to reach out to these people and ask key members that we identified in the community to be a part of our community advisory committee. And so we additionally were working on the grant. It was just the staff. We had a key committee of staff that worked on this. And so by the time we had our first in-person meeting, we already had a good legwork of the trail alignment completed. So we requested from this committee, we asked them, what are their thoughts on the alignment? Were there any areas that we needed to consider that we had not considered? And then we asked them to partner with us by requesting letters of support, and then also to get the word out about our amenities survey that we would be doing. And so we went to that meeting and we had two asks of them, really. Yes, we wanted input on their alignment, but we really wanted their help with the letter of support and to help get the word out with the amenities survey. And so then when we launched our amenities survey, the community and that committee rallied behind us. A few days prior to launching the survey, we went out to the local trails and did a Facebook Live. It was myself and another team member, Armando, and we did that Facebook Live video in English and Spanish, just getting the word out that we're going to be doing an amenities survey and to keep your eyes open for that. So then when we launched that survey, everyone helped us by sharing the Facebook post and then telling their friends. So it was truly a community effort to get that. And in 10 days, we had over 1,200 responses. So this is a community of 30,000 people, and we had over 1,200 responses in 10 days. It was really, really exciting. And we knew that Russellville, they're interested. We're interested in trails. We want to see that quality of life, quality of place here. And we know they're interested in trails because we've done other surveys that have been open for much longer periods of time and didn't nearly get the support as we did on that. So it truly shows the support that we have in the community. And then also from our community advisory committee, we identified key partners within that committee to have one-on-one meetings with for this application process. And sorry, I lost my place because I have some notes. And so we met with different strategic partners. We met with the manager from our One Roof organization. They host or house our River Valley Food for Kids, and they also house our free medical clinic. And when we met with them, they gave us some comments or suggestions to help us make sure that we aligned this trail so that citizens would have access to their facility, because the trail does go right by that facility. We also met with the school district, and when we were talking with them and met with them, we talked about outdoor learning activities, but then they also highlighted neighborhoods where kids walk to the high school. And then we made sure that we were strategic on including links to those neighborhoods so that kids could get to school. And then we also met with the Arkansas Department of Transportation, and they had some comments, and we realigned our trail alignment to make sure that it worked for the Department of Transportation. And then the last thing I kind of want to go back to is the Community Advisory Committee. We asked them for letters of support, and we had over 30 letters of support for this RAISE grant. And I do think that's because we kept communicating with our Community Advisory Committee and letting them know what we needed and where we were with this application process. We were talking to everyone. We were sharing with our city councilor. We were talking to planning commission. We talked with any group that we could that we were applying for this RAISE grant. When is a community like Russellville going to have $25 million, which is we were, shooting for $25 million. When are we going to have that kind of funding to be able to build trails and to nearly double the amount of trails that we have in Russellville? And we were very strategic about the location of our trails. Our entire community is historically disadvantaged, but only 2/3 of it is areas of persistent poverty. And so although we have more trail alignments on our master plan, we chose the alignments specifically that lapsed not only in the historically disadvantaged, but the areas of persistent poverty. So we had both of those key points in our application. So we were very strategic about the location that we were choosing. So advice for others, definitely look for projects that are similar and ask questions, reach out, ask them for their application and build on that. I know Andrea Jacobson hit on this at the beginning. She hit on it in the webinars as we were getting ready to apply for the RAISE grant, but read the NOFO and then reread it. And then really look at that rubric and pay attention to the high categories and look at your grant. Can they hit the high categories in that rubric?
Sarah, that's so helpful. I'm going to just stop you there because I want to make sure we have enough time no, I love the enthusiasm. And you hit so many points that are super important. And as somebody who sends a lot of surveys and doesn't always get as robust of response as you do, I think it's incredible. And there's going to be some Zoom polling at the end of this. So I want everyone to remember what Sarah said and how important it is. And that tie-in that you made to Justice 40 and really targeting those communities, making sure that showed up in the application, I'm sure was very, very helpful in with the reviewers. And I would just picking up on something that Andrea and Sarah and others have said, make sure that you have somebody who doesn't know anything about this project or about your community read your application before you submit it. because if they don't understand it, guess who else can understand it? USDOT. And so you're so in it and you get it because you've been living this and you're so excited. You need that outside perspective. That's really clutch. Now I have to come to Mayor Buffaloe, who I know you chair the Environment Committee for U.S. Conference of Mayors, and that sustainability is really at the heart of your agenda as mayor. Columbia received a $23 million raised grant for a range of activities, one which to electrify the bus fleet by 2032. Can you talk a little bit about the project, how it's going, and how it's going to help your city meet your equity and sustainability goals?
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Yeah, happy to be on, and like the previous mayors, really happy to get money. So thank you, Department of Transportation. You know, the city of Columbia, we obviously have been measuring our greenhouse gas emissions for numerous years, both in my previous life and now in this seat as mayor. And our municipal fleet makes up about 23% of our greenhouse gas emissions as far as I measure for our municipal operations. And we have one electric bus that we bought in 2015. Since then, we've grown it to 4 electric buses. But we've been limited because of our space and capacity at what we lovingly called our bus barn. And so this is my thanks to the Department of Transportation for funding the unsexy things. Because we know it's exciting to talk about purchasing electric buses and the opportunity here, but it's impossible for us to grow our fleet if we don't have the capacity and the electrical upgrades to actually support those fleet. And so for us to move towards our goal of zero emissions, so basically 100% of our fleet by 2050 to be zero emissions, we know we need to have the non-sexy things there, like the infrastructure and the space to store them. As we were going forward with this, one of the things that in talking about, I think you touched on it there in Arkansas, you know, our staff, and I know Shane's on, our public works director, we don't have a full-time grant writer within the city of Columbia. So I know that they applied once before, got fantastic feedback, and then applied again. And I want to give a shout out to our city staff, and especially Shannon within our Como Transit, because she went through a grant writing workshop in order to craft a better application. And so especially for us who are maybe like small to mid-sized communities, leaning into this network of support and the resources that are available to us are just what makes it possible for us to be competitive with some of the larger cities that maybe have more resources. So really appreciative to things like the local infrastructure hub and others for helping us be successful in some of these projects.
Great. And talking about that unsexy work, because, you know, we keep hearing from everyone that without, you know, upgrades to the grid, upgrades to the infrastructure that sustains all these electric vehicles, we can't possibly meet the goals, the ambitious goals we're all setting. So Shane, I want to pull you into the conversation. I know you were having a little bit of camera issues, but we still want to hear from you. If you can talk to us a little bit about the application process. How did you decide, you know, the RAISE was the right program for you? You know, as Mayor Buffaloe has talked about, a bus barn wouldn't necessarily be the first project I would think about when I think about a RAISE grant. So how did you guys spotlight that and then pull together the elements?
Sure, and I will apologize for video issues. Mayor Buffaloe might tell you it's all for the best that I'm not on video, but this, as she said, this is Columbia's second application for a RAISE grant on this project in as many years. That we used that feedback we received from the first application, and we had very positive feedback and used that accordingly with our second application. The City of Columbia has a shared public works maintenance facility, which houses our street maintenance division, citywide fleet operations, and then transit parking and maintenance operations. The facility was built in 1965, and therefore, as you might imagine, is in dire need of upgrades. To that end, Public Works completed a master plan for the facility, and we've been saving money via our quarter-cent capital improvement sales tax to pursue future improvements. However, the total cost of these improvements would take about 25% of our total tax revenue generated over a 10-year time span. And we share that money with police, fire, and all of our roadway and sidewalk projects. Therefore, any effort to move a project like this forward was going to require a grant.
That's really important. And I know we only have a few minutes left with each of you. I would love to just do a lightning round. Maybe you take 1 minute. What do you think it was about your grant application that really like moved it over the edge? And what we heard from Andrea is that eligibility criteria, right? Just making sure you actually touch on each of the factors in the NOFO is so important. And then there becomes a discretionary point. So I'd love you to maybe be able to touch on, if you can, both of those. What was it about your project and the eligibility piece? And then what do you think moved it over on the discretionary? Oh, I'm gonna start with you, Mayor Warren. We'll go in the same order.
I'm having the audio problem too. Can you repeat that question?
What do you think set your project apart? I mean, you had the kids, so obviously that helped, but you still
Right.
had to have the right project. What do you think it was about your project that made it sing this time?
We were able to connect 2 interchanges and 2 freeways, the 15 and the 210, with this span of property involved. And we also were able to connect another city. The high school that we worked with actually is in another city, the city of Rancho Cucamonga, but the majority, 70% of the students are from Fontana. And we also had partners at the state that wanted to fix the area in front of their facility. So the more partners we brought to the table, it was almost like not just 2 for 1, but 20 for 1. And everyone had a story of how it would impact them. But I got to tell you, the first wasn't the charm. We applied 3 times and we were consistent in making sure we got those briefings. The staff at U.S. Transportation is second to none. They will work with you. They will show you where you had your shortfalls. They will assist you in getting recommendations to get to the right people for your engineering studies. And it was just, we basically sat and listened to every detail from their lips, and we made corrections accordingly. But the bottom line was the partnerships we established throughout the area that were going to be impacted by this grant.
Okay, I'm going to come to you, Mayor Teague.
Well, I was not actually involved in the application process that much, but if I can give any advice to mayors out there, support your team, give them your 100% support, back them up, encourage them. And when you get the grant and things are going slow and you've got to go through the NEPA, you got to go through all of the different things, give them your support, give them your patience, let them know, hey, listen, I know it's a process. Thank you for doing what you're doing. They're pushing through a lot of paperwork. They've done a lot just to get you there, but just encourage them in the process. That's the best thing I can do is be the best supporting role player I can be, because they're all doing an amazing job.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you, Mayor Teague. I think your comment with Mayor Warren is really important, and it harkens me back to words Mike used to always say, which is the most important thing he ever did as mayor was build a team, right? Build the team and then support the team. And so, and then I think, use your convening power that Mayor Warren just talked about, right? You're as the mayor, you don't have to be the one filling out the application. Hopefully your city has enough people working for you that you're not the person filling out the application. We know there are some small cities where that's not the case, but what could you be doing to convene folks? I'll pass it over to Sarah.
So I think really what kind of probably pushed us over is that we really tried to hit all the high points in the rubric, and we had all of the community support. And we really believed we could do it. We really did. It took Mayor Teague coming along and saying, yes, you can absolutely do this, to pull the rest of the team in, but we all believed we could do it. So we worked tirelessly, lots of weekends to pull off this application, but it was well worth it. And it's going to make such a huge difference. We know it's about $1 million a mile for trails, and we're maybe getting a quarter to a half a mile a year. So for 13 miles to get this done in this amount of time would not have happened without this funding.
That's great. And I'm going to we're going to pull up a poll to get some thoughts while we ask Mayor Buffaloe. What made the difference in your application, you think?
Well, similar to Mayor Teague, obviously I'm thankful I didn't have to write it. But I think the big thing besides the supporting of the staff is that is as the mayor kind of setting the high level vision for where it is that we're going, focusing on these big goals that we have, sustainability and resilience and investing in our disadvantaged communities is key to the success for the future of our community. And I think from the mayor's office, that's one of the goals we have set. And so I think that obviously shows that we're committed to the plans that we've put in place, that we're putting out there the request for funding to implement those plans. Because I know for us, like the location of this, one of the big things is it's also going to help us with our new homeless shelter that we have going in that has wraparound services. And we know we need to connect those community members throughout the services we have available in Columbia. And so the bus barn, the opportunities, the improvements to this site, it's all just them putting into implementation the goals and the plans that we've set from council.
Great. And Shane, I'll give you the last word. Do you have anything to add?
The only thing I think I'd add is we knew we needed to do something. And so we had already completed a master plan for our facility. And I think that really helped show our commitment to the project, that we had already put some money into it. I find that tends to help.
That's absolutely. And I think it goes back to what Andrea said before, which is that, DOT and administrator hit on this as well. DOT wants to make sure it is not giving funds to a community where this project won't get realized, right? The more you can show that this is a project that has the right people on board, the approvals, and is ready to go, that if the only thing you need is that money, that you're more likely to get it funded. Well, I need to thank you all so much for your participation today, and congratulations on winning. And we can't wait to see the photos and these visions made real. And then I put a lot of things in the chat while we've been talking. A bunch of those are case stories. We've been working really closely with Accelerator for America and the Drexel University lab on learning more about projects that are eligible for IJA funding. So I've shared in the chat case studies from Albuquerque, New Mexico, Toledo, Ohio, Phoenix, Arizona, and Lincoln, Nebraska that have been awarded funding on projects that are all RAISE eligible. And then I just want to let everyone know, I alluded to it earlier, on Tuesday, November 14th at 2 p.m. We're going to be holding a celebration of 2 years since the bipartisan infrastructure law. And we're going to have federal experts and city leaders come on and talk about, how do you get to success? And then how do you share the story of it to make sure that the effects of it are being felt now and the whole way through the construction process, so that that you're getting your team rewarded and they're feeling that, and that residents know that changes are coming. So please make sure to check out our calendar, the resource on our website, localinfrastructure.org. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you to all of our partners, and we'll see you soon.